FC Barcelona have always been known for trusting their own players and not buying big names elsewhere. Their core of players usually consists for a big part of players out of La Masia. These players are the epitome of Barcelona. They grew up with Barcelona. Barcelona made them what they are, and they always give everything for that badge. Players from La Masia are the most Barcelona players that you will see. And if there is one La Masia player who is the most dedicated to Barcelona out of them all, it is Marc Casado. Unlike a lot of recent big talents like Ansu Fati, Gavi, Lamine Yamal, Pau Cubarsí or Marc Bernal, Marc Casado didn't have an easy time breaking through in Barcelona's first team. For years, he had to be patient and play for Barcelona Athletic, while seeing players his age like Ilaix Moriba and Alejandro Balde get their chance in the first team. Ronald Koeman or Xavi never really considered giving Marc Casado a proper chance in the first team. But Marc Casado never gave up on his dream of breaking through at Barcelona. He has always stayed fully committed to Barcelona Athletic and became their captain. For years straight, he was arguably even Barcelona Athletic's most important player. And this season, Marc Casado finally got what he deserved. Hansi Flick actually trusts him, and he's been one of Barcelona's most consistent and reliable players thus far. He might have only broken through at the late age of 21, but it is clear that Marc Casado is actually the real deal, and frankly, without him, Barcelona would be in a lot of trouble right now. Marc Casado has become a crucial player for Hansi Flick, and in this video, we'll talk about how he has managed to have such an impact on the team. First of all, we have to take a look at exactly how important Marc Casado has been until now. I mean, he might not be in the spotlight as much as Rafinha or Lamine Yamal, but he's been playing just as well as them this far. In preseason, he was one of Barcelona's most solid players, but that's just preseason, and you never know whether someone can actually play at the same kind of level in La Liga. Marc Casado, however, has been putting in one great performance after another. He did his job really well against Valencia, and in the games against Valladolid and Girona, he was literally one of Barcelona's best players. But weirdly enough, his best game up till now has probably been the Champions League game against Monaco, where he was arguably Barcelona's best player. It was either him, Lamine Yamal or Pau Cubarsí. But the matter of fact is that it was a really hard game to play in because of Eric Garcia's red card after only 10 minutes. Pedri and Marc Casado basically had to try and control the midfield on their own. And to be honest, Marc Casado did so really well. He won the ball back frequently and he rarely ever lost possession. As a matter of fact, I think Pedri actually lost the ball more than he did. Long story short, Marc Casado has been really solid and reliable up till now. And you know what's funny? He has actually played in different roles as well. At the start of the season, Hansi Flick used him as the more attacking player out of the two midfielders in his double pivots. Marc Bernal was the one who played in the deeper role. Back then, it seemed that Hansi Flick was mainly going to use Marc Casado in that less defensive role. I mean, he was doing really well, and Marc Bernal was also doing really well in the other role. Then, as you know, Marc Bernal got injured, and Barcelona suddenly had a big problem. Marc Bernal seemed to be their only natural single pivot, Eric Garcia at the end of the day is still only a defender, and even Frenkie de Jong or Gavi later in the season wouldn't be real natural single pivots. However, there was still Marc Casado. Hansi Flick chose him as his main replacement for Marc Bernal. And to be fair, Marc Bernal had been really good up till then, so it would be hard to step into his shoes, but Marc Casado had no problem playing as that deeper midfielder. Together with Pedri in that double pivot, they dominated every midfield they faced. So that means that Marc Casado can really just play in two different roles in midfields, so he's just incredibly valuable for Hansi Flick. He can play as the more advanced midfielder in the double pivots, that's the role that Pedri usually plays in now too, but he can also play as a deeper one. He is a hybrid of Busquets and Xavi in some way. And I mean, just imagine a world without Marc Casado. What would Hansi Flick have done without him? Sure, he could have used Eric Garcia as a defensive midfielder, but I think you probably prefer Marc Casado in midfield. Without Marc Casado, Barcelona would have frankly been screwed right now. Even in that game against Monaco, it would have probably been better for Hansi Flick to not play Eric Garcia at all, and to just play Marc Casado in defensive midfield. In reality, Marc Casado originally played in the other position in that double pivot, and after the red cards he became the more defensive midfielder. But the game might have looked very different if Marc Casado had played there from the start. I mean, just think about that red card. Ter Stegen was to blame for that, sure, but Eric Garcia is also not exactly Sergio Busquets. You kind of saw that he was a little confused and he didn't really communicate well with Ter Stegen. All I'm saying is, Sergio Busquets himself would have found a way to get out of that situation. Probably through going down and receiving a foul in his favor. And Marc Casado, being a natural midfielder and not a defender playing in midfield, would have maybe also gotten out of there. And right now, Marc Casado was even still on the pitch. So just imagine he wouldn't have been there at all. As you've already heard me say, Barcelona would have frankly been screwed without him. So obviously, Marc Casado is the perfect player for Hansi Flick's Barcelona. But there might be one concern that Barcelona fans have. Right now, he might be playing a lot, but there's also a lot of injuries. Gavi, Frenkie de Jong, Dani Olmo, Fermin Lopez, they're all on the sidelines right now. What will happen with Marc Casado when they all return? Because no matter how good Marc Casado may be, they are all elite midfielders. Sure, Dani Olmo and Fermin play in a more advanced role, but indirectly that still affects Marc Casado because of players like Pedri, who can play in Casado's and Dani Olmo's role. Gavi, Frenkie de Jong, that's where the actual problem is, not to mention Marc Bernal once he returns in the further future. So, can Marc Casado actually have enough first team minutes this season? Well, first of all, we gotta know what Hansi Flick's ideal midfield would be if everyone is fit, which is actually already a really hard matter without Marc Casado. Dani Olmo plays as the attacking midfielder, that's not up for debate, he's just too perfect for that role. Pedri can play there too, but doesn't have the same attacking instincts. Fermin Lopez is the player you would bring on from the bench for Dani Olmo, or the player you will play there if Dani Olmo gets injured, which will still happen over the course of the season, believe me. The hardest question is who you pick in that double pivots. You've got 3 world-class midfielders in Pedri, Gavi and Frenkie de Jong, and you can only pick 2. No, shifting Gavi to the left wing like Xavi did is not an option. I mean, not if you see how Rafinha's been doing there thus far. Any double pivot you're picking here would be good, of course, but sorry Frenkie de Jong fans, I think a Gavi-Pedri double pivot is the ideal option. Pedri is the more advanced one out of the two, and he would basically play in the role that he's been playing in mostly under Hansi Flick. He would be the metronome. He controls the game. He's actually kind of comparable to Xavi, only with a slight Iniesta vibe to it. Gavi would then be the deeper one out of the two. And okay, he might not be a natural pivot like Marc Casado or Marc Bernal, but he does have incredible press resistance, and defensively he's going to give you a lot of solidity, which is what Frenkie de Jong wouldn't do as much. Gavi cannot play long balls the way Marc Casado, Marc Bernal, Pedri or de Jong do it, but if you have Pedri next to him and someone like Pau Cubarsí in defense, that's not the end of the world. The bottom line is that with Gavi, you've got a really balanced midfield. Gavi, Pedri, Dani Olmo. That is probably Barcelona's ideal midfield 3. But this video is not about Gavi or Pedri, it is about Marc Casado. So what would be his role in a world where everyone is fit? Well, there are a lot of games in the season. Gavi has just returned from a very serious injury, and we've also seen that Hansi Flick is really careful with Pedri. The same goes for Frenkie de Jong. I think his ideal role is that Pedri role. It would allow him the freedom to roam freely in midfield and be the heart of the team. That would get the best out of him. But just like with Gavi and Pedri, you have to be really careful with him. Especially given that Barcelona have probably rushed him back too early numerous times already. In other words, you might have 3 world-class midfielders in there, but we really don't know how reliable they are. You also need someone who can play in both double pivot positions in order to give these 3 enough rests. And that is where Marc Casado comes into play. He might not always be a starting 11 player throughout the season, but he will always have some kind of important role, that's for sure. As a matter of fact, Xavi should have maybe used Marc Casado more last season, because if he had done so, then maybe Frenkie de Jong wouldn't have suffered a relapse injury. Marc Casado will be huge, not only for Barcelona this season, he might help save the career of Pedri, Gavi and Frenkie de Jong. I've already said it many times, but I'm going to say it again, without Marc Casado, Barcelona would have been screwed. Lastly, it's also interesting to look even further into the future. I mean, we know Marc Casado probably has the quality to have a long-term career at Barcelona. His quality isn't a problem. The problem is that Barcelona's midfield is that good in terms of quality that even someone like Marc Casado doesn't have a certain future at Barcelona. Because when Marc Bernal returns, he will probably get a starting 11 spot in Flick's team, Pedri will never be benched when he's fit, Gavi has a really unique profile, and Frenkie de Jong has had numerous shouts for being the best midfielder in the world. Yeah, the midfield seems pretty stacked for the coming years. Of course, Marc Casado could always have a rotational role, but we don't know whether he's always going to keep on accepting that. Maybe one day he really wants to be a starting 11 player, and when he cannot get those minutes at Barcelona, he might leave the club. We're talking about the future here, so nothing we're saying here is certain, but what is the most likely scenario for Marc Casado in the coming 5 years, let's say? Well, I think either Pedri, Gavi or Frenkie de Jong is going to stay injury prone and get sold by Barcelona. Right now my bet would be on Frenkie de Jong to be that player. Marc Bernal is hard to make any conclusions about. He has only played a couple of games for the first team. But I mean, he did make it seem as if Sergio Busquets never left Barcelona, and he did it at 17 years of age. If he can actually recover well from his injury and consistently play at that kind of level, he is always going to become a cornerstone player for Barcelona's next generation. Then there's Gavi, Pedri, so what about Marc Casado? Well, the thing with him is that he's very loyal to Barcelona. He already had the chance to leave Barcelona or to go out on loan, but he has always stayed committed to his childhood club. That's why I think that in the next 5 years, even when he doesn't always play, he will stay at Barcelona. And he will always be a midfielder who is really reliable and who can come on and save Barcelona in terms of injuries. Marc Casado is truly Barcelona's savior. That was it for today's video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and feel free to share your own opinion on Marc Casado in the comments down below. And of course, Força Marc Casado, and have a good day.